Hello, welcome. Special address. Now, I've been with the Calexit movement since it's founded. I started the whole thing. Although no one owns the movement, and there's many other people in the space, and really it's just the idea that California could do better on its own, which is not be held to any one person. However, while I am for all of California leaving, and I think that we have the inherent moral superior right for that, and I think that's the best option, I have to say that after artillery shells were shot over the 5 freeway, disregarding the governor's orders, and did result in fractions, pieces of the artillery shells falling on the freeway, which potentially could have killed someone. We're in a new game, especially after you convene a series of at least one big meeting where you bring all the generals and all the admirals and all the flag officers together, and you basically tell them in one clustering that's basically never happened like that before, hey, let's use liberal cities as training grounds for the American military. Unprecedented times, existential threat. So what I wanted to point out is that I think Prop 50 could work. I'm not saying it's the best. I'm not saying I'm promoting it. I'm still for all California leaving, but I think it could work as an independent nation state. And I think the California government knows that. So today we're covering this. Future nation state, explain Prop 50. What is Prop 50? So basically, states do not typically redistrict sooner than every 10 years. That's when you're supposed to do it. However, the Texas legislature decided they wanted to redistrict now, right before the midterms, which is not normal and not every 10 years and not when the census comes out. And so this is from the Legislative Analyst Office, the think tank here. And they're saying that's really bizarre that Texas is doing that. Kind of strange, really unnormal. And so in response to the 2025 Texas redistricting, where basically Donald Trump said, I want 5 more Republicans in Congress. And then Texas said, well, let's get to it and see if we can make it happen. In response, California said, under the leadership of Gavin Newsom, if you do that, we'll do the same. Now, if you back off, we won't do it. But if you do it, we're going to do the same thing. And so basically they proposed this map here. It's going to shift 5 positions that would be normally for Republicans historically to hardcore liberal districts. So starting at the bottom, there is the map on the left is the current map. The map on the right is what Prop 50 is proposing. The map on the left, you have a big red square at the bottom just behind San Diego. That is completely eliminated. If you go up to number 2, you'll notice that there is a section in what we call the Northern Central Valley that goes from pink to blue. And then finally, section 1, you have the complete eradication of the Jefferson movement and all Republicans up there. They'll never have power again. So that's what they're proposing, and that's why they proposed it. A lot of people in California are very upset and take this really damn seriously. So Gavin Newsom said, in response to the Republicans in Texas saying, hey, we'll find 5 more seats for you, Trump, we may not have a future election in 2028. Midterm elections may be rigged. To have a sitting governor say that elections may not matter and they may be rigged is historic. He's not alone. This shocked the hell out of me. California, the whole nation. So that's Barack Obama, former president, one of the most competent presidents in America. You don't have to like him. But California beloves him. Here's the point. The guy was leader of America, and now he's saying, California, if you don't pass Prop 50, the whole country falls apart. So there's Obama's quote. There's some articles about him backing it. California, the whole nation is counting on just California. So here's the leader of America saying, California, if you don't do this redistricting, basically America goes in the trash. That's the former leader of America saying that. And here's the governor saying, we may not have elections in this country anymore. Here's a selection of the advertising that went out. This is not politics as normal as they're saying. And so that gets us to this map. And here's what I'm proposing. The map on the left is Prop 50. The map on the right is what I could call a potential working nation state. Now, I want the whole state. I think that's best. But basically, I want you to see how damn close. So the map on the left and the map on the right have 2 differences. One is, notice the pink section in the center there. That's now all blue in the nation state. Notice the black line on the map on the right. and the red section on the map on the left. That red section on the map on the left is eliminated and turned into blue. The pink section on the left is eliminated and, well, is kept and turned into blue. Now, here's why I think that'll happen. That pink section that goes to blue, so once again, there's the pink section in the middle, and it goes to blue. So let's cover that first. That is a very low population map. So on the left is the Prop 50 map. On the right is called a population density map for California state. And that shows where all the population is: dark red, superpopulation, light pink, very little population, white, almost no population. What you can see is that, well, first, California retains the overwhelming majority of the population in California. So all the dark red there is pretty much almost all captured outside of the Republican stronghold. Now, in that center pink, now turning blue, there's the cities of Kerman, Tipton, Delano, and Lamont. These are tiny cities of about 10,000, 15,000 people, maybe 40,000, 80% Latino. And after all Latinos have seen the horror stories from the Trump administration, gassing children in Chicago, ramming cars into citizens, disappearing veterans for days, 120 to 170, almost 200 U.S. citizens grabbed against their will without their rights being respected and disappeared, only to come back a few days later. So Latin people are souring. I know that Trump got a big section of the Latin vote. He did not get the majority of the Latin vote in California. That's a lie. Nor did he get the majority of the Latin vote in America or the majority of the male Latinos in America. That's also a lie being passed around. So in California, it's really 50-50 for Latinos on the last Trump election. And when we look at this, they're really souring. We got to sell 80% Latin districts to join the new nation state of California. I think given everything we've seen out of Chicago and recently, and the horror stories of good people who've been here for a while, but are technically undocumented, being disappeared, and the guy who was sent to El Salvador to be beaten to death, will win that vote. That's why I think we can count that light pink as light blue, because they've ruined it with the Latin people. They never really had an edge here, and it's a majority Latin area. Now, let's cover the little black line. And here's what I'm getting at. This is almost a perfect breakdown for a workable nation state. So on the left, you're going to see the economy. This is called an economic matrix of economic activity. It comes from a scientific study a few years ago. All of that red is where economic activity is going. People traveling back and forth, sending money, doing goods, services. Almost all of it's captured in outside the red district, or basically in the California nation state. Almost all of it, 90, 95%. Now, if you look at the population map there in the center, and that black line midway through the population map is pointing out to Fresno. We'll get to that in a second. If you look at the population map, it's very similar to the economics map, very similar. And what you can also see is we retain 95% of the population. Now, in the economics map and the population map, if you go to the bottom, you'll see a tiny white line about the bottom third of the map. If you go to the map on the right, Prop 50, you'll see a black line about in the bottom third of the map. Go to the left, you'll see white lines. So that's showing you where I want to make a division. Here's why. When we look at this, almost all of the road system for most goods and services between the major populated areas is intact with this map. That's why I was blown away. Also, most of the water is retained. So the Republican areas really don't have population or economics or mineral wealth or any connection to the economy or the people, really. What they do have is some water. Now, when you wipe out the entire northern Jefferson region, you basically get the majority of the water. So the Republicans are pushed to the mountains where they have no economic impact and own no resources. And I'll also point out in the water map, see that green valley in the center? That's all ag land. We retain 95% of the ag land. So we retain almost all the ag land, and we retain the bulk of the water in the water map. You'll see there. Now let's go to the power map. That's the one on the far right. This is showing power distribution channels and electric stations. almost all of it is still here. And the LA region and the Northern California region power distribution systems are largely intact. So the red area that goes to the Republicans is on the periphery. And we're really not splitting up the Sacramento Power District or the Bay Area Power District or the Northern California Power District or the Southern California Los Angeles Power District or the San Diego Region Power District. As you can see in this map and the power map, they're all retained and intact. Their extremities are somewhat come off, but the power comes from the bulk, not the extreme. Now, in each one of those maps, you'll also see the white line, and then you see a blow-up square of where that white line is blown up even bigger. And what I want to point out to you is on the roads, with that one little piece of pink there at the bottom there that we're trying to cut off with the white line, the 5 freeway goes through that. Now, if you look at the map in the center on water, a major aqueduct goes through that section. And if you look at the map on the right, it's a lot of power lines go through. So if we do this, where the black line is, we just cut off that little section of hardcore red, we can retain a complete network for our road, water system, and power system. And that's why I recommend that be the new nation state. So the pink center will be converted to light blue because we'll win the votes and because Donald Trump's horrible reputation with Latinos now after they've seen what he actually did. And all we need to do to make this a perfect working model of a functional nation state is where that black line is on the right, just cut that little piece of red off. Now, what exactly are we talking about when we say that? Well, it looks like this. So here's a blow up. There's that red section we want to cut off in the top of the middle of the map. And what does that really look like in real space? Well, the maps on the left and the right show you. It's not that big a piece of land. It's largely butted up against the foothills on the outskirts of Bakersfield. And we really just need to take that piece of land so that we could keep the 5 freeway in contact, the electrical lines, and the water lines that go through there. There's a lot of infrastructure that goes right along the 5 freeway there. If we can retain all that, this is almost a perfect working model. Now, let me show you the other area. So here's a map of the problem area. So we just covered number 2, which is this. We're going to have to cut that piece off to keep the power and the water and the roads continuous. And it's a tiny piece of land, as I've shown you here. It's not that big. And that will solve problem 2. Now, problem 1 is there's this piece of red sticking right out into the middle of the Central Valley. Well, it's not really a problem. Here's how you deal with that. The dashed red lines will be additional land given to that red congressional district area so that they have a complete freeway system from the far left to the far right so that people stuck in that red area have transportation that goes from the left to the right throughout their area. They can travel through freely, not a big problem. The blue dashed line that cuts through this red line or red shape is what's called a pass-through freeway. So people in the rest of California would drive on the freeway through that section, and they would get pass-through rights. Now, if you look at the map on the right, what I'm showing you is that the freeway that goes north-south along the 99 is already separated from the freeways that go east-west. So there will be no additional infrastructure that's needed to be constructed in order to allow a pass-through freeway on the 99 through this red section and allow the red section to continue commerce and transportation unfettered. They have east-west routes that are on top of the 99 freeway. So there's no disconnect between the 9, so that people can drive on the 99 north and south, and they will never cut off east-west traffic. So if you allow pass-through traffic on just that freeway, the 99 is intact. We get what we need. They get additional land, and they have the ability to transport themselves as they want within their fiefdom of that area. Let me show you again. That's section problem 2. And here's our issue. We're going to allow pass-through traffic on the 5 freeway, and then they can keep the rest of it. Now, what about them invading other areas, right? You're like, hey, that doesn't look good. But point this out. This is the population map. Blue is liberal. Red is the Republican area that they'll have. They're all in the mountains. This map shows it better. So again, blue is population of liberals. Red is the conservative Republican areas that they get, they're all in the mountains. If you look at the map on the left, it's a blow up of the one on the right. You can see that the Republican areas are almost all exclusively mountains around LA or the Sierra Nevada mountains or the high desert or the mountains. They're pushed out of the flat land, which is why they don't have economics or resources or agriculture or infrastructure, because it's hard to build that in the mountains. And that's really the only place they have a stronghold, where they're really the majority. People say, oh, there's millions of Republicans here. True. All in the mountains, basically. I mean, even the map that was unfettered on the left, the map on the left is the one before Prop 50. Almost all of that red and pink area is in the mountains. Almost all of it, 85% is already in the mountains. That's what I'm saying. Oh, you have all these Republicans. Yeah, you can have the mountains, take them. I've long thought that. And then when I saw the Prop 50 thing, that's basically what they said is, we're going to cut off the northern part of California from you, which is where most of the water comes. And then you can have the rest, which is a couple dams. And we'll be able to function on our own. There's so much water in the north, we could divert it for all our needs and all our agricultural needs. And we'd be just fine. So again, problem one is fixed by this, a pass-through freeway allowing us to travel through, and then a little bit of extension for them. That allows them to live their life, and we can travel as we want, keeping the road network, connected. There you can see that one little blip in the middle sticking out, and there's a freeway going through it. Now, the last problem area is in Southern California. As you can see, the Republican area is split into two sections. One is the big chunk in the Sierra Nevada mountains. The other one is a little chunk of mountains in the back of Los Angeles, but again, all mountains. So this part isn't so drawn so well, so bear with me, but basically what we would do is this. On the maps on the left, you can see the road network and the topography network of the Republican districts that are split. There's a red line connecting the small red polygon to the larger red polygon. That's a freeway. Now, on the map on the right, I'm showing you that could be the 15 freeway. Basically, what you do is the map in the center shows you that you could put off, you could basically cut off the on-ramps and off-ramps of this freeway. And so this would become a pass-through freeway for the red to connect that one broken off piece of red to the rest of it so that nobody's cut it off and no Republicans can complain. So we would get a pass-through freeway here, and they would get a pass-through freeway here. And all of the freeways going east-west are already separated from the 15, so there wouldn't be any intersection issues. We could travel back and forth, east and west, as we want, but they would be able to travel along the 15 only north and south. They couldn't get off on any on-ramps or off-ramps, and this would allow them to connect those two areas without having to build additional infrastructure and without stopping the transportation flow of California to America. So problem one, that stretch sticking out. We have a pass-through freeway, and they largely can keep the rest. Problem two, we shave off about half of that and retain it. Problem three, we provide a pass-through freeway for the conservatives to connect their two sides. The big issue is this. If we cut off that little half at the bottom there, we can keep most of our infrastructure intact, and we don't have to spend a lot of money to build new infrastructure. So if you keep the infrastructure intact, you don't have to build new infrastructure. We won't have to really retrofit our roads or retrofit our water systems or retrofit the power lines, because we've kept the majority of the infrastructure for the remaining California nation completely intact. That's why you got to cut off that little piece. And once you do that, you have a functional nation state. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out was that Arnold Schwarzenegger has said, this isn't going to be temporary. This is going to be a long-term plan. And he's using that as a criticism against Prop 50. I support Prop 50 because the Republicans are trying to rig the American system. But I also agree with Schwarzenegger. This is going to be permanent. And so that's why I'm spending time on this. If this is permanent, look at the map on the left and look at the map on the right. You'd have to win elections in that little Central Valley area of 4 cities, which California, the world's 4th largest economy, could do. And then you need to cut off a little bit right there around Bakersfield. And you have a perfect workable nation state. And I think this is going to hold because when you look at the legal challenges against this, they're pretty weak. The Republican Party had submitted a lawsuit. There it is up top. Now, their major arguments were, there was a couple, but It's clear that intentionally power to redistrict was taken away from the California legislature. Redistricting should only occur once a decade. Redistricting would involve extensive public engagement, and the people expressly prohibited partisan gerrymandering. That's all true. Here's the thing. Newsom has said straight up, this is temporary, and if Texas backs down, we'll back down. So they told California someone else is doing partisan gerrymandering, not within a decade, and that's the only reason we would do it. Secondly, we don't want to do this, and we'll back down the moment they back down. But here's where the Republican argument really lost weight. Public Policy Institute of California shows 56% support of the people who thought this vote was really important, basically 70%. When there was also 60% support by the Berkeley poll. And finally, PPIC asked, do you think America's heading in the right direction? And 77%, almost 80% of California said no. And then there's an Emerson poll that shows 57% of likely voters. So 2/3 of voters understand that this is a reaction to Texas trying to rig the system, and that it is not normal, and they have to do something abnormal because of that. Additionally, 2/3 of Californians are supportive of this. So the idea that this is not what the people want, and they'd be upset about this, Newsom and them explained, hey, we got to jump in the swamp because they're doing it. And a majority of Californians backed them. So they're really, the arguments the Republicans made really don't exist in their lawsuit. They can't say this is against the public will. It clearly is. And the government of California was explicit about what this was about. Last thing, here's an interview with one of the guys who developed the maps. And he said, I got a bunch of angry text messages from Republicans, but they could basically find nothing to push back on. That's because when you make these redistricting maps, there's like 4 or 5 things you have to legally do. And they did all of them. So if you want to say it's political, sure. But if you want to say it's illegal and done incorrectly, that's totally a lie. They did it based upon the guidelines. That's why the Republicans couldn't really find something. That's why there's not much pushback on the maps themselves. Now, UCLA did a study on this, and they found that you really can't challenge Prop 50 at the state level. If you wanted, you could challenge it only at the federal level, and that would be the only way you could win a legal challenge. Here's the problem with that. The Supreme Court said they're not taking redistricting cases. About 2-3 years ago, they said, hey, we're going to pass one for Virginia, a conservative area, and one for a liberal state. They can gerrymander, and we'll never touch this again, which means there will be no federal challenge in court because the place you would go said, we're not touching this issue. Since it can only be challenged at the state level, it will never be. And since the Republicans have a pretty weak argument ripping it apart, it'll probably never be undone. So I think Schwarzenegger's right. Now, I'm for a permanent nation state, but I got to point out, we win that vote in the pink, and we take a tiny bit on the left, and we've got a functional nation state, and it would work. All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much. See you soon.